week since the election season really officially ended, although clearly we are still in the midst of it. And there is so much going on. Thank you for being a part of Chalk Talk this week and every week. I appreciate you being a part of the show. We're going to talk obviously about what's happening around the world of sports. And we, of course, have to also talk about what's going on in the world of politics. We are 1 week from the election day of 2020. We have officially declared president-elect and vice president-elect, and then we have an administration that is, I don't know, throwing temper tantrums and refusing to accept the results and trying to, sully the water, if you will. And so one of the things I want to talk about today is why it is so important. Who is a part of the conversations? Who is leading some of these discussions as the narrative, the national narrative is shaped around things like elections and around things like racial injustice or inequality and around things like sports. It is important the voices who are at the table, who are leading these conversations. It is more important now than ever, which is one of the reasons that I continue to, you wouldn't think it'd be a fight in order to be able to cover sports, but when it comes to, at least in the National Football League, it is. It is a fight because they do the best job of trying to quiet voices that they don't want to hear. And maybe it is not the entire league, but I will speak for the team I cover, which is the Houston Texans. And that is an ongoing effort and an issue. And so, I talk about it here because I think transparency is important. I covered that organization for many years under the heading of my own platform. And if you follow my work, you know that I have been working on this platform and working virtually, doing a virtual show before the pandemic, before it became a thing, before, whether you want to call it a digital show or a podcast, whichever category you want to put us in, we can fit in all of those. We've been doing this for 5 or 6 years. So this is not new space, but what is new is the climate. And so now that is being, at least with that organization, used against me in terms of my ability to cover the team and tell stories. And it goes back to me asking questions of the organization about their lack of equity and inclusion, diversity at their executive levels. And so I bring that up to say this. This is why equity and inclusion is necessary, whether we're talking about covering the Houston Texans, whether we're talking about the elections and the results of the elections. Who leads those conversations matter because it shapes the narrative. And if those voices are not equitable voices, and I'm cautious about using the word diversity because that becomes a box that we check. They have to be voices that are inclusive and equitable. And if you are not willing to offer that, then what are you trying to hide? And so I just want to share that. You're going to hear more from me about this in coming weeks, of course. And you know what? Here's my reality. Here's the space that I sit in. And it is not just about whether it's the Houston Texans or in some cases, the University of Houston. I don't even talk about them, right? Because that's just not even a fight I'm willing to take on. But it is necessary. And so as we move forward, as we navigate these very kind of tenuous times, trying to transition from one administration to another, because that is what our Constitution says we're supposed to do. If we're going to be, go back to that document and, forget about it being the right thing to do. It's the legal thing to do. But you see people holding on to power so much, right? Why is that? On one hand, there are some who say, yes, of course, Black Lives Matter, and we want to, yay, we're all in this together. But unless, of course, you want an equal piece of the pie, you want some equity, you want a piece of this, you want to be looked at in a way that is equitable. No, we're not trying to do that. So we have to have these conversations, and we have to have people in these discussions all across the spectrum, talking about business, talking about healthcare, talking about sports, okay? Talking about peeling back the layer and saying, okay, yeah, there are guys that make a lot of money, but what's really happening inside this organization, right? What's happening at their executive levels? And we should be able to have those conversations. It's not a lack of professionalism, but it is about power and control. And if you know anything about me, that's not how I operate. I'm going to follow your rules. Sometimes maybe too much so, because I don't want to give you any reason to be able to say, you can't, you didn't do this. We said don't step on the 12-yard line and you stepped almost on the 12. I'm not that person. I'm professional, I'm competent, and I'm qualified. And what I'm not going to do is in 2020, okay, in this climate, just shrink and go away quietly because you think you can put me in some kind of box. But that's the spirit that we have to have across the board. Whether it's covering the Houston Texans, whether it is covering these elections and the narrative of, well, you know, what about all the people who didn't vote, who didn't vote for the Biden administration? What do we have to do? And I'm sitting here going, is it because all you guys have your kids in those leagues where they don't declare winners? Because that doesn't make sense to me, right? In 2016, when Hillary Clinton lost and the Democrats lost, there was no big conversation about what to do with all of those voters who voted for Hillary Clinton. It was, y'all lost, lick your wounds, go on. And remember, Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. So my point is this. Is simply as we start our conversation and we look at what's happening around the league of sports, and we're going to talk about the fact that basketball may be getting started, has a date now for when they will start, and update on the football, the NFL, and a look in on colleges. And we have to keep these conversations, and we have to be, vet where you get your information, one. And although my show is live on Facebook, I'm a journalist, and I give you fair and accurate information, and perspective does matter, but voices matter. And so I encourage you to support platforms that are not like just crazy conspiracy theorists and spewing a bunch of nonsense that's not validated in truth. I'm not suggesting that, but make sure that you're listening to people. And that you are getting information for yourself, and that you don't start going down rabbit holes of conspiracy. That's important, right? And we need to press these media outlets. We need to press them, because the reason that there are platforms like mine is because the landscape has changed and people are getting their information different places. So if the major news stations in your market or wherever you live are not giving you diverse and equitable voices and points of view, then don't continue to support them. Find some places that do. That's what I'm saying, because information and knowledge is power. And so we have to build on that, what we have seen. Listen, if this election season didn't teach us anything else, in what we saw happening in the state of Georgia, let's just look at Georgia, and let's look at an effort that was spearheaded by one woman, Stacey Abrams. She will tell you she had a lot of help, but she spearheaded a movement that didn't just start a few months ago. She's been laying the groundwork for years. But she said voter suppression is not okay. Everyone should have the right to vote, and every vote should be counted. And so she went out and led the effort that registered 800,000 new voters. That's a lot. So what if we do that in a state like Texas, right? Go out and engage voters potential voters, untapped voters who don't think their vote matters. Get them registered and get them engaged. And here's the thing I say. A lot of those start with conversations. It starts with talking to people, not talking at people. I cannot wait until there is some sort of election, some sort of campaign finance reform. okay? Because the barrage of commercials and the amount of money thrown at elections, I think it's just unsavory. Now, let me say this. I think you got to do it to get in Georgia, because I'm going to flat out say it. The two Democrats need to win those seats in Georgia so that there can be some chance that this new administration of President-elect Biden and President-elect Kamala Harris can get in and do their jobs, because we've already seen that the Republicans, led by Mitch McConnell, have no interest in working with them. It is not about the country. It is about their own personal interests. It is about power. And dare I say, it is about preserving whiteness. Yeah, I did. I said that because those are some of the things at the heart of it, right? Tap dancing and tiptoeing around, we just can't really afford to do that anymore. We've got to attack these conversations and these issues head on. And so sports and politics are closely intertwined, because a lot of it is the same, right? Sports is a big part of our national, landscape. It just is. Wherever you fall in terms of what sport you may or may not support, I get it. But those are the stories that often lead newscasts. And that is why when athletes started being more engaged and saying, not only are we going to march, but we're going to register to vote. We're gonna vote, but we're gonna also help others to get registered, and we're gonna encourage our team leaders and owners to say, open these arenas so that more people have places to vote. That's what the democracy calls for, and that's how it works the best. And the reality is, the face of this country is changing, and that's difficult for many people to accept. It doesn't mean that you have to be excluded from these changes, but you do need to participate and be open to others. And so that is part of the conversation that I will continue to have here. Good morning, Charles. Welcome. It's always good to have you in the room. Good morning, Jay Chenier. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you guys for being a part and always engaging on Chalk Talk. And Bobby Scott says Stacey was a drawing card because of the injustice done to her during her governor run. Bobby Scott, she was, but what she did was she also put together a plan, right? She said, because they wiped off, and I don't remember the number, almost 1 million voters off the rolls in Georgia. They disenfranchised a lot of voters in 2018. So she's been working on this, getting people registered. Prior to 2018, she's been doing work in the space, but she hit the ground hard from 2018 to now and continues to do so. And even though we know that this race is going to be, a lot of money is going to be poured into Georgia because the Republicans don't want to lose those 2 seats, because that would mean they'd be in a tie in the Senate, which means the Senate would go to the Democrats because the vice president, which is Kamala Harris, would get the tie vote. And so Mitch McConnell would not be able to have 4 years of obstruction like he did with President Obama, where for 8 years. He said it. My goal is that he's a one-term president. I will never forget that. Okay. And so what we know is it is not about the people and moving things forward. Joe Biden has already started talking. He met yesterday with his new coronavirus task force, with scientists and lawyers and people who do the work so that they can hit the ground running, so that they can attack this pandemic. He's calling governors and mayors around the country because there needs to be a national plan for navigating this virus and eradicating it so that we can, celebrate our birthdays as a group, so that we can spend holidays with our families, so that, like my mother's in the hospital now. She had surgery yesterday. Praise God, it went well. But we can't stay with her all night. At least we're able to be at the hospital during the day, but they're limiting, who comes and goes because the virus is affecting everything. People have their kids at home, going to school, not being able to be socialized on a daily basis because the virus is real. Businesses are closing. Some will never come back. The economy is a mess. because of this pandemic, because of this virus. And that's not even talking about the issues we have with the other pandemic, which is the social justice movement, which is not new, but it's just been actually, people are now saying, okay, it's a thing. And you're right, Bobby, her opposition did purge the rolls, and so what it says is, yeah, Georgia's the South, but the face of this country is changing. We don't look the same that we did in 1940 as a nation. And so we shouldn't be ruled the same way. And people have a right to participate in a democracy. That's the whole point of the Constitution. And this is new, coming over here and starting this place, right? So we, the people, that's us, that's all of us, have a right to be a part of it. And I'm excited to see so many of you participate. And let me say this before we start talking a little bit of football. The narrative that many people try to start that, Black men are not going to be supportive, they're not supporting Black women. Listen, Black men voted. And you say, well, man, 20% broke for Trump. That means 80% did not. Okay, so I'm focused on the 80. And moving forward, how do we do a better job of talking to men, especially Black men, so that they feel included, Latino men, and let's understand that some of that's cultural, right? We know that there's some of it is cultural. I'm talking about in the Latino community. They are not a monolith, and neither are we, but we need to vote as a monolith when it benefits our interest. Okay, I'm just going to be really clear about that. And so culturally, the idea of a woman as president, as in 2016, or a woman as vice president, there are some cultures that they don't get down like that, right? They don't cut like that. That's not a woman's place. But what I'm saying is, I don't want there to be this narrative that Black men were not a part of the process. I saw so many Black men at the polls. I heard them on stations across the country talking about taking people to the polls, going out themselves, getting their kids engaged. And so I don't want there to be this, the same way I push back on people who want to say that President Obama didn't do anything for Black people. Let's not allow people to have those narratives about us and ours. Shut that down, right? Are there some times that you just want to strangle the man in your life? He may be a Black man, absolutely. But you're not going to denigrate him, and you're not going to talk about him, because that's just how people are in relationships in general. I feel the same way about my sisters. So let's not do that. And don't make me start reading y'all every week the facts about President Obama's presidency. So I just want us to be smarter and wiser, and to embrace and take care of one another. The road ahead is not going to be easy, but what we know is we have got to fight it and walk it and talk it and go through it together. So Bobby says election reform. How can millions of dollars spent on an election that pays $150,000? Imagine, you make a great point, Bobby. Imagine if that money went into programs, right? Went into communities to help build neighborhoods and businesses and create better centers for education, created entrepreneurial centers for young people so that they would have options growing up, so that maybe it's not about getting in debt for $100,000 to go get a degree that's going to pay you. It's going to take you the rest of your life to pay off, right? That we have some better options, that we can build some things. We can build more in our communities that make sense for us, that serve us, that we can afford to pay for healthcare because we spent hundreds of millions of dollars in an election. When the truth is what moves the needle is the ground game. It is the ground game. It's the hard work. And yeah, fancy commercials and those things, you get inundated. And if you're like a lot of people, you probably start to tune them out, right? But what really works? It is the ground game. It's that grassroots effort. It's the touch. It's the call. And it's difficult to do that during a pandemic. But the ground game, you can win. Like you can win. You can win in spaces without hundreds of millions of dollars. That's what we come to. That has got to change. And thank you so much. I appreciate that. Total healing and restoration for my mom. She may be listening, so thank you. I feel like it's going to be, she's going to be fine. And yes, Bobby, 80% Black men did their jobs. And so we say, okay, well, we got to figure out what made those other 20% decide to cut for Donald Trump. There's any number of things. There's some folk you're not going to get, right? I think was the number for Black women, 91%. So now that Black women are saying, hey, like Joe Biden said it, Kamala Harris has said it, you know, I know that I am here because of you. No, that's not the end, just that somebody acknowledges the work of Black people and Black women, but it is important on those platforms that it has been acknowledged and recognized that we matter. And not only do Black lives matter, but Black votes matter. And so you have to do things to continue to get those, because without us, the democracy would have possibly failed. I mean, I'm not being, you know, dramatic when I say it was at risk. There was a huge, huge risk. And so Bobby talks about the article that says the Latino vote was a reason that Texas stayed red. You know, I think that there, you know, where there are some obstacles, as with anything in life, there's opportunity. And so what is it that makes, listen, the Latino community, and in this state, we have more Mexican Americans, like in South Florida, there's a lot more Cubans and Venezuelans and Puerto Ricans. So it depends on where you are in the country. Tend to lean more conservatively. Their views are more conservative. But here's the thing. A lot of Black people are more conservative in terms of their views. You know, they have some liberal thoughts in terms of spending, but just in terms of views. And so how do we talk to people so that we can start having a government that works for everybody? Okay, it shouldn't have to be this contentious. It shouldn't be where you lose and now you don't want to go home. I mean, can we talk about how ridiculous this sounds? Let's look at two people who are, I even hate to have to mention their names, Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham, right? So you think that there's a problem with the votes, but the ones that put you back in the office, those votes are good? They're on the same ballot. So the ballot was good for you, but it must be crooked. I mean, those two things can't be true, right? So Lindsey Graham, the ballots were okay because you won, but it wasn't. How does that work? So it's only okay on the ones where y'all win? I mean, how childish, what ridiculous kind of messages are you sending to young people? And here's what I tell you. Those behaviors, racist behaviors, are learned. We don't come here with that. Here in Texas, we had recently, I think it was last week, some kids showed up at a school and draped in like the Confederate flag. They learned that stuff at home. They're being taught that. They didn't come here. You're not born with that kind of those kind of ideas. You are taught that based on your environment. So, you know, it is not all lost. There is work to do, but it doesn't start with coddling a group of people who don't want to follow the rules and all of a sudden feel like if they don't have it their way, there's a problem. Yeah, that's not a good idea. Tell the truth to young men, perhaps understand the influence of rappers and entertainers. Yeah, I think it is telling the truth. And the influence is, you know, and hopefully that moving forward, you know, we can, you know, get some of those guys in the fold. But you got to be willing, right? If you want to double down and not be willing to get the information, you know, there's a structure in place. And here's the truth. You got to acknowledge the work of Black women when you talk about doing the work of activism and working in our communities. Black women have been doing it for decades, and they've had support from Black men. This is not discarding Black men or discounting Black men. But if you are really about moving things forward, get with some people who are doing the work and say, listen, how can I help? What can I do? Because you've got some stuff already in place. I'm not saying it's not your lane, you know, be quiet and just sing. Like you shouldn't tell LeBron to be quiet and just bounce the ball, or tell me you should just talk about sports. I'm broader than that. I have more depth and breadth than that. And my show has always been more than just sports. So it is a way. There's work to do, and we just have to figure out how to do it. But people have to want to be a part of the process and a part of the solution, right? And so I don't have all those answers, but I think it is, you know, listen, Bobby says the ballot crap is distraction to manipulate the electoral vote. Stay woke. Yeah, you know, we got to, and here's the thing. Everybody, if you're listening, because, you know, I talk about voting year round here on this show, get registered. Okay, we need to stay registered so that at any point that something pop up, we can vote, right? We need to stay registered, but we need to stay engaged. This year was a presidential election. Next year, in some parts of the country, there are going to be elections for governor. In Texas, for instance, there's a gubernatorial election. We need to stay engaged. There are going to be some city council elections. There are going to be elections in our local areas. And as in case we didn't know it, the pandemic has taught us that our local electors, officials really, really matter. They really matter, because at the end of the day, when the federal government failed us, because they did, the states had to step in and do stuff. We had great leadership locally here in Houston and Harris County. At the state level, not so much, because he was, you know, indebted to the president, who wanted to say, yeah, science didn't really matter. Pandemic's not really real. Listen, we have a problem. People are getting this virus and they're dying from it. They're losing their lives. Disproportionately, Black people, Latinos, Indigenous people are losing their lives. Just look. And I hope that you haven't felt it, but I don't really know anybody who hasn't experienced loss with a friend or a family member from what this virus can do. It's not your fault. You know, it's like, well, what do they do together? We've got to stop doing that too. What we know is it's a problem and that it can be handled, but we have to have a national plan and strategy. And so when the new administration is allowed to do its job and efficiently and effectively transition, we will be on our paths to eradicating this awful, awful virus. And so, yes, we have to stay engaged. All elections are local. Bobby, you're absolutely right. Engagement is the key. We cannot stop what happened throughout this last few months, last week. We have to stay engaged. I'm like, well, what can I do from Texas? Can I call some people? For folk in Georgia, how can I help in that process? And here's what I'm doing. What can I do here in Texas to reach some of the people that maybe it was Bobby that mentioned earlier, the Latino men, the Latinos who didn't either vote or support a change, because they are suffering the same ills that we are, right? A lack of healthcare, a lack of access to healthcare, a lack of being disproportionately impacted by the virus, because we have these frontline jobs. We are the essential workers keeping things going, right? Whether it's in the food industries or grocery stores or healthcare. And so we have a lot of things in common. How do we work together so that we can, this is about being better for everybody, right? The stuff that's going to be better for those of us in the African-American community, it's not going to be bad for other people. I don't know where that comes from. The thought that if we do things that make life better, more equitable, you're taking something from me. No, you're just going to have to do some work. And we always have. And so I think there's a way to do it. Bobby says, get tested. Absolutely. It's not fun. I have been tested. I think it's important. And there are some free testing sites here in town and around the country. Testing. Here's what we also know, right? Work in your community. Absolutely. What can you do start where you are, start where you are. But there is work for all of us to do. And if we all do a little bit of something, everything will get done. So I appreciate you in letting me start the show. We always talk about that, but it was really important to me today that we keep this narrative going. History was made As Kamala Harris said, the audacity of Joe Biden to put a woman, not just a woman, but a Black woman, Asian American woman on the ballot to break that glass ceiling as a vice president. And listen to this. You guys remember during the debate season, during the primary, a Black woman who challenged him. And so he has enough confidence in himself. I know a lot of people are like, I don't like Joe, but I think it speaks to his character that he would be like, okay, but this woman is smart. This woman deserves to be here. She would be a good partner for me. She has been a part of it, right? She introduced him. He let her address the nation as well. She thanked Black people for the support. She talked about what it means for women. And like she said, while I may be the first in this office, in this spot, I will not be the last. That is the kind of mindset we have to have as people, right? Don't just you get in and push the door closed and say, I'm here, that's cool. Who can I bring? Just know that I'm just setting the ground for somebody else. It is not just about me. So I was excited about that. And then Joe Biden clearly and plainly said, he said, listen, my campaign was dead in the water. It was Black people that saved it. You have always had my back and I will have yours. I appreciate that. And no, I'm not super excited just about words, but you got to start somewhere, right? With an acknowledgement of that, because it's been so easy for so many on network television and on some of these cable stations to not really discount it, but to not really address it and give it the fullness of what it is in terms of the importance and the impact of the Black vote. Black votes matter. Yes, Black lives matter. Absolutely. And Black votes matter. So for those of you who have been participating, kudos to you. Thank you for being a part of the civic process, right? Being a part of it. Jim Clyburn, right? Jim Clyburn saved Joe. He was a rainmaker. And so I say, while I am this whole battle about progressives and centrists, I thought that Jim Clyburn said something that was really important on one of the interviews he did this weekend. He said he can't lead in his community, in his district, like somebody else can lead in theirs. Both could be both Democrats, but you've got to lead the people, who elected you to serve, right? So that's super important. Find a place, find your place. All right, let's find your place. All right, so before we go today, I am going to tell you a little bit about the Texans, who did get in the win column again on this weekend. They are now 2-6. They beat the Jaguars, so they are undefeated against the Jaguars in 2020. Listen, a win's a win, and when you have been struggling as much as this Texans team is, you take that win. Houston's 2-6. The Jaguars are 1-7. The Tennessee still leads the division at 6-2. There is one undefeated. Is there one undefeated team? There is only one undefeated team in the league, and that happens to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. They are 8-0. Kansas City is 8-1. Buffalo is 7-2. So that's what's happening in the AFC. If the playoffs were to start right now, Pittsburgh would win there. It'd be Pittsburgh and Kansas City, Buffalo, Tennessee would be the division winners, and then the wild cards, Baltimore and Las Vegas have the 2 shots at the wild card. I don't know if you guys had a chance to see any of the game over the weekend with Tua. Let me just do that today. I'm still a little tired. In Miami and facing off with Kyler Murray. I mean, that was some excitement. Okay, that was some excitement. So there's still a lot of football left to be played. A team like the Houston Texans and Jacksonville Jaguars, like I said, Texans are 2-6. Clearly they are not winning the division and getting to a playoff this year. They're just not. They are close to the bottom. There is one winless team in the National Football League, and you can probably guess it is the New York Jets. The Jets are 0-9. So over in the NFC, the Saints and Seahawks and Packers are all 6-2. Tampa is 6-3. So it will be interesting. The Dallas Cowboys are near the bottom at 2-7, right down there with the Giants. So, thank you, Bobby Scott. I appreciate it. I'm glad that you could be here. And listen, if you don't catch us live, you can always go back and catch the replay. So thank you for that. And Black women in South Carolina. Listen, Charles, Black women everywhere have been doing the work. You know, they have been doing the work. And, you know, the Latasha, is it Brown, who has the national organization, who's been riding a bus around the country for months, registering people to vote, engaging people, getting out the vote. It has been a lot of work. So, hey, good morning, LaDonna. Good morning. Oh, I see you with your Steeler emoji hearts. Right. Listen, the Steelers are quietly playing really the best football in the league, not just because they're 8-0, but defensively, they've been who they are. And then offensively, with Roethlisberger has come back and, you know, he's been pretty much been. So that, of course, is pretty interesting. And I mentioned about basketball. There was some news overnight from the NBA. And as it relates to what's happening moving forward, the NBA has decided on a start date. Wait, I had all of that. It is December, like the league's about to start. Okay. And these things kind of came out. So they agreed on amending the CBA, which is a collective bargaining agreement, and free agency, which will start on November 20th. That's 2 days after the draft. The draft is November the 18th. And then they've talked some about the cap, right? So the salary cap is $109.1 million, and the luxury tax is $132.7 million. It'll be the same next season. In future seasons, the cap and tax will increase by a minimum of 3% and a maximum of 10%. So free agency begins at 6 p.m. on November 20th. That is a week from Friday, with signings allowed at 12:01 on November 22nd. So this 2 weeks from Sunday is when they can start the signings, okay? Health officials around the NBA are cautious of a December 22nd start, largely because of the 72-game schedule and the travel that's now involved. So it's tougher for those that just played and those who haven't played since March. It's going to be another period of kind of uncharted territory. So we're really waiting to see some of that. For Rockets fans, there was a report that came out that says, I think John Paxson is close to signing. Did I get that right? With the Houston Rockets to be a part of Stephen Silas's staff. And in fact, since we last visited Stephen Silas, how could I not tell you that? Stephen Silas is the Rockets' new head coach. I think we talked about it last week. The weeks are running together. It's been so busy in the midst of all this happening in the election season. But the Rockets have a new head coach in Stephen Silas. And I think it's a great choice. He's already said that, he's definitely retaining John Lucas. He grew up with John Lucas, like his dad he's known John Lucas his whole life. And he said he's super excited to be able to work beside him. And he's rounding out the rest of the staff. And when I talked with him last week, and one of the things that I asked him was, what's going to be, who is this Rockets team? I mean, like, what kind of, how do you say, system are you going to run? Because you have who you have, right? And so what does it look like in terms of, I wanted to see if I could find it for you because I meant to play it. I ran it on my, platforms, but I wanted to also let you see. So maybe I don't have it. Okay. So at any rate, I think I can show it to you. To be able to show you the question, the interview with Stephen Silas. He is, I'm excited about him as a coach. You know, he's got what they call a high basketball IQ. You know, we hear that a lot. What does that mean? He grew up in basketball. His father is Paul Silas, so he worked for the Cavaliers early in LeBron's career when his dad Paul was a coach. He's worked under Don Nelson. So back when three ball, like using the whole small ball, was not really called small ball, he's been a part of those systems. He's known for his offense. Spent time with Charlotte, and he comes to Houston to being kind of the offensive coordinator, if you will, for Rick Carlisle and the Dallas Mavericks. And he talks about just how much he has learned throughout his entire NBA career that has prepared him for the moment that is right now. So, I am excited about Stephen Silas as the next head coach, what he is going to bring to this organization. And let me see here. All right, so I'm going to play this bit of this interview for you. Let me do this. I'm going to show you, and I'm going to make it full screen, let you hear from the Rockets' new head coach.
So, thank you so much.
Can you talk about, you mentioned it a little bit, you said that you've had some experience with small ball, but can you talk about just your vision? I mean, you may not have it all mapped out right now, but what do you see this team, when they talk about the Rockets, what will it look like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, like I said, I've had experience with small ball and working for Nelly, who's a basketball genius, Hall of Famer, and learned so much from him. And looking at the roster, there are a lot of things that we did in Golden State back then that we can do with this group. I'm actually in the process of studying the team and making sure that I have a good feel for the strengths and weaknesses and the different things that I can do. But one of the things that Rafael and I have been talking a lot about, and during the interview process, I wanted to get across is, in today's NBA, you cannot just play one way. You have to have multiple ways of playing. So small ball can be part of it, but also possibly having a bigger guy, a traditional type center where you can roll to the rim or duck in or do different things to where the matchups will be a little bit better and more traditional. So on the offensive end, just being a little bit more, a little bit less predictable, I would say, is what I'm looking to do. And then on the defensive end, the same thing, be a little bit less predictable as far as so much switching and getting into maybe play a little bit of zone or be able to make sure, as an offensive coordinator over the past 2 years, playing against teams that have different ways of defending is really tough, and it takes a lot of time to prepare for. So I want to be that team. I want to be the team that you have to spend a day preparing to play the Houston Rockets before the game, so you make sure that you have everything covered. Thank you so much.
That was Rockets' new head coach, Stephen Silas. And, he talked about a number of things. He talked about his staff. He talked about being able to work with guys like to coach James Harden and Russell Westbrook, how he has coached against them, and how difficult it is to coach against those guys because of their talent, how he's met with them and they're like, what do you need us to do? So that they're in. And so Rafael, the new general manager, who's been with the Rockets organization for years, worked very closely with Daryl Morey. Although he's a different person than Daryl, you're not really missing anything in terms of knowing systems and what they've been working on and knowing the organization. So, you know, they will get to hit the ground running. The question was asked of Rafael and said, listen, have you been given anything from Tillman, the owner, saying, you know, we don't want to spend too much to avoid the luxury cap, or has that ever been the mantra? And he clearly said what Tillman Fertitta wants to do is win. That has been his directive since he got here, and that is what he wants to do. So Siobhan says, I wish he was bringing one of his players with him. Not going to say which one. Yeah, I don't know if it's that easy. And so, yeah, Bobby, Rafael has been with the organization, and I'll put up one of the interviews I have with him. A little bit of sound with Rafael from that press conference, press availability last Friday as well. He has been with the Rockets organization for I'm sorry, you know, making sure I don't miss anything happening. Yeah, so he has been, Rafael Stone has been with the Rockets for about 15 years. They promoted him. His approach may be, you know, a little bit different, but, you know, it could prove out to be what the Rockets really need. And I think I saw that in some article. You know, we talk about the moves that Daryl Morey has made over the past 13 years, really, and you know, getting players like a James Harden and bringing in a Dwight Howard, and you know, although maybe that didn't work out, but just always being in the conversation, bringing in a Chris Paul, and then that not working, and going and getting Russell Westbrook, and you know, and Eric Gordon, and the PJ Tucker, you know, some of the role players that have been a really big part of this organization. So Rafael played basketball at the collegiate level. He went to Williams College, and then he went to Stanford, became a lawyer, and he was in corporate law for years. And so, yeah, his background is that, and I'm trying to see, he's been in the organization for 15 years. And part of the GM job is to iron out contract extensions for players and coaches. So he's been a part of that. He's been a part of that part of the organization, but he's also worked very, very closely. All the moves that Daryl Morey has made over the years, he has been a part of that. So he is the new general manager. So listen, we got a lot of work to do, guys. We really do. And so here's what I encourage you to do. You know, stay engaged. If you know people in the state of Georgia, reach out to them. Say, hey, call, text somebody. We have got to help Georgia deliver those 2 Senate seats so that we can have some work done, so that there will be, you know, 50 Democrats and 50 Republicans, so that there's a chance that there's some legislation that all of us need. Even the people who don't vote for the Democrats need. Like, we need to eradicate this coronavirus epidemic so that we can get back to our lives. And some things will be forever changed. You know, I don't know if I ever want to be in a place with just super, super crowded people, but I do want to be able to move around. And like Joe Biden, President-elect Biden said, we won't have to wear a mask forever. If we do, just commit for the next few months. So let's buckle down and get this thing done. This is not about taking something away from you. It is about giving us all the ability to be safe, looking out for your neighbors, looking out for your family. So wear a mask, practice social distancing. This Thanksgiving, you know, for us, it's just going to be the people who are in my mom's house. We're not yeah, Thanksgiving's a time of family and fellowship, but we're in a pandemic and my mom's 89 and we're not going to do anything that it jeopardizes her or my siblings or myself. And we're going to get through this. And I encourage you to do that as well, because, you know, they keep saying it's going to be a dark winter and the numbers could go up. You know, those of us that live in Texas, we don't suffer from the super, super cold winters. We haven't in the past. Who knows? Because clearly climate, global warming is an issue because the weather, we're still talking about hurricanes in November. So just be smart and make good decisions. Stay engaged. And thank you guys for always being a part of Chalk Talk. If you will, share the video, share the show. I'll be back here next Tuesday and we will continue these conversations. And speaking of what's happening, I didn't say this, the Houston Texans are on the road again this weekend. They travel to play Cleveland. The Cleveland Browns this weekend. Oh yeah, Jeff Luhnow is suing he's suing. I'm sorry, he's suing the Houston Astros. Jeff Luhnow, the former general manager, who of course was fired after the cheating scandal was revealed earlier this year, and he had, I believe, $31 million remaining on his contract, or at least he's suing for $31 million. Let's see here. Yes, this weekend, the Texans are playing in Cleveland. They play the Browns in Cleveland before coming home the following weekend to play the Patriots. So stay tuned. I'll keep you posted. I'll let you know as Stephen Silas rounds out his Rockets coaching staff. And as I'm sure there'll be conversations, or there'll be rumblings coming up about what the Rockets are going to do in terms of tweaking their roster, making it any better. And, you know, we'll keep our eyes on what's happening in college football as the coronavirus continues to go around the country and unfortunately impact, different schools. We saw what happened after Notre Dame won last week when all those kids rushed the field. So practice social distancing, wear your masks, and wash your hands. All right. Thank you guys for being a part of Chalk Talk. Please continue to follow, support, like the show. Follow me on Twitter at Kim Y. Davis. And I'll see you next Tuesday at 11 a.m. Central Time. But I'll see you throughout the week with little updates until then. Have a great week, everybody.